I was super bearish about AI, but the future is peaceful coexistence. This thing isn't taking jobs. This thing can enhance what we're already doing.
B2B Content Strategist is the podcast where you'll hear actionable advice and strategic guidance from content marketing leaders. I'm Amy Woods, CEO of Content 10x, and I sit down with leading B2B marketers to discuss how they overcome challenges with limited time and resources and execute winning campaigns time after time. If you want to improve and streamline your content marketing, keep listening. Hello and welcome to the 6th episode of Season 2 of the B2B Content Strategist podcast. I'm your host, Amy Woods, the founder of Content 10x, and in this episode I speak to Chris Hutchins, the Director of Content Strategy at 6 Sense, a B2B SaaS company who are arming revenue teams with data and visibility to convert high-quality pipeline into revenue. Chris is also the owner and senior consultant of the Worthy Work Company, a marketing consultancy helping B2B companies create content with unique brand messages and a human voice. Now, in this episode, Chris and I discuss his role at 6 Sense and their overarching content strategy. We talk about how he optimizes and streamlines day-to-day processes, as well as the ever-expanding and changing world of AI and how it influences his work. We had a fantastic conversation about AI, so I think you're going to really love this one. There's plenty to look forward to in this episode, a fantastic conversation with Chris Hutchins. Let's dive in. Chris, welcome to B2B Content Strategist.
It is an absolute honor and pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for coming on. Very much appreciate it and really looking forward to our conversation. To get started, to jump in, as they say, in summary, could you tell me about your role as Director of Content Strategy at 6 Sense and also, of course, like what 6 Sense does?
Yeah. Well, the first question might be harder to answer than the second, but 6 Sense started as an account-based marketing platform for B2B solutions for sellers and marketers to kind of help find and identify buyers who are researching for solutions, but are doing so anonymously, meaning typically marketers jump for joy when they receive a lead from a form fill on a website, right? Like, contact us for more information, contact us for a demo, or give us your email for an ebook. But we have found that only 3% of website visitors actually do that, right? There are many more buyers and buying teams out in the world that are doing this, their product research, kind of like under the waterline or under the radar, and doing it anonymously by, visiting trade publication websites, forums, social media, and doing their research that way. Well, 6 Sense is kind of has the ability to kind of see those invisible footprints in the snow, right?
Right.
That we all kind of leave behind as we're doing things like this on the web, and then compiles it and using machine learning and super red AI, is able to kind of compile it and analyze it in ways that B2B buyers and marketers can acquire contact information, understand where buyers are in the buyer's journey. It's a whole list of tools and services that we provide to kind of enhance that, that prospecting experience for sellers. But the thing that fascinates me most about it as a content person is that it can also make recommendations to a marketer or a seller in terms of the buyers at this particular point in the buying journey, here's the kind of content that you should send to them, because these are the concerns that we've deduced that these are the concerns that they have on their mind right now. So there's this real nice kind of elegant mapping of, super brain AI and what me and my team do. You kind of there's a direct line between that and the consumer or the buyer, and I think that's really interesting. So what I do at 6 Sense is that I'm the director of content strategy, which means that I'm generally speaking in charge of making sure that our editorial calendar is running properly, that we are ideating and creating and publishing content that is meeting our business needs or speaking to the trends of the greater market, and also kind of contributing to some more like I'm basically kind of like the last line of defense when it comes to what we put on our website. I try to vet as many words as I can of anything that we do, and even like emails that we send out to prospects. It's kind of like an all encompassing role. And within recent months, my job has become increasingly higher, what I call higher up the mountain. I'm not involved in the day to day of content production, and editing or assigning stories like I used to be. But now I'm kind of able to, being on that higher part of the mountain, see farther out in the distance and triangulate our content strategy to meet the business needs and the market needs.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And in terms of your team, so I saw a post that you put out on LinkedIn recently that said that you have the best content marketing team in the business. So congratulations, that's amazing.
Yeah, it wasn't easy, but I finally did it.
No, that's amazing. That's wonderful. What does your team look like? So how is it structured, kind of people and the roles that you have within the team?
Yeah, it's generally flat from a like direct reports point of view. So I oversee I'm going to get the boring stuff out of the way first, like the org chart stuff. I'll get that out of the way, and then so it's like there's me, and then I have three direct reports, and then let's say between 2 and 4 freelancers that we work with pretty regularly. One of the direct reports is what I'll call our editor in chief. And he, runs makes sure that the trains are running on time, and is properly ideating, assigning, and editing, the content from the rest of the writers. I have 2 staff writers who are full time. They, I hail from the newspaper business, so we have kind of, and my editor, or the editor in chief, also hails from the newspaper business. So we kind of take a newspaperly approach to content production and management. So and how we kind of also distribute stories for assignment and writing. So what we do is that we have what we call GA, or general assignment stories, and these would be written for blog posts, or how tos or guides or whatever. And this kind of content is written for any general reader, but typically our general reader would be a marketer, marketing persona. And then we have what are called beats, or subject matter. This is a newspaper term where it's basically like you're assigned a particular kind of sphere of subject matter that is, pertinent to our business interests. You've got the manufacturing beat, you've got the FinServ beat, you've got the, whatever else, what beat. And what we do is at the product beat. And we have these writers, focus their expertise and their writings in finding stories that complement those beats, because again, those are serving our business needs, and making sure that they're like regularly in touch with subject matter experts across the business to make sure that whatever we're writing isn't only accurate but is like timely and is meeting again the needs of the business. So those are the 2 writers that we have. And then our freelancers, between regularly 2 or 3 that we work with on the daily. They're typically doing what I would call the GA, or the general assignment stories, right? The ones that are written mostly for anybody. But when needed, they can pinch hit and do some of this beat related stuff too.
Cool. That's really interesting. And then in terms of your content strategy, so obviously having looked at your content, there's so much from the events, webinars, blog, you've got Talking Sense podcasts, you've got video series. Really love the news team 6, like the videos that you guys have been doing saw those on LinkedIn, and really varied content, lots of followers, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube. There's a lot going on, obviously, and you're doing a wonderful job in 2023. What's your overall content strategy look like in terms of the priorities that you have?
Yeah. Firstly, thanks for all the compliments about the content. And it's interesting because while most of the content, is overseen by me, not all of the content is kind of like strategized by me. So for instance, the Talking Sense video series is the brainchild of Latny, Conant, our CMO. Like that's just her jam. And if she pops up and says, I want to do a video series where we interview sales leaders, we're like, we're right behind you. No problem. And so what our content, like support, like, the stuff that my team does, like supports the promotion of that. Like we will write blog
Yeah.
posts. the News Team 6 stuff, is stuff that I helped ideate, but like our brilliant video team really took the lead in terms of like refining those scripts and getting all that, together. So it's really is like a team effort that extends over multiple kind of creative parts of the marketing team, right? And so when it comes to forging what a content strategy looks like for the year, it always goes back for me in terms of like, well, like what are the nuts and bolts business needs that we're trying to meet? Like what's new that we are trying to do? So for instance, in mid-March, we're releasing a new product to our platform that we believe it's super disruptive. We believe it's going to be super helpful. And for me, it's okay. Well, I know that that's going to happen in mid-March. So how can I reverse engineer a content strategy that not only like supports the short-term needs of making this debut as powerful and as enticing as we can, then like understanding that that's just the beginning of the party, right? Then there is like a full year's worth, 6 months worth of content that extends over there. So like that's an example of like these kind of tentpole events or product releases that we have distributed throughout the year, and me making sure that we have a strategy that supports that, and hopefully like a narrative. And this is a little bit different than like what I would consider traditional content, but a narrative that supports that. What's the theme of that? How can we extend that theme over the course of a calendar quarter or 2 quarters or 3 quarters? Like how can we, like if we are making the big debut of the product in March, what would be the next, predictable part of a story that would unfold in the following quarter? Like, is it, maybe it's evidence that this works, right? And so we dedicate an entire, chunk of our content creation efforts on making sure that people understand that they can see that this thing is working and it is worth their while, right? And maybe the next part of the 3 act story is showing that how customers are benefiting from that. I'm a long form storyteller. I have had experience writing novels, and so what I try to do is kind of prove, when I can, kind of approach a novelist kind of mind to understanding that just because you put the baby out in the world doesn't mean that like that's it. Like you then have to kind of nurture it and help it grow. So there's that kind of like long term thematic kind of practical strategy that we do here. But then there's another component of the strategy, which is kind of like the nuts and bolts plumbing of, okay, well, what are we doing really well now, just from a practical content production point of view, right? And what needs of the business overlap with what we need to do better? Like where are we falling short? So for instance, the first, let's say 6 or 8 months that I was at 6 Cents, there was a business need to make sure that we had lots of that we needed top of funnel content to get people into, the sales journey. And so we leaned nearly exclusively into that. And by the end of that, 8 months or whatever it was, like my writers were just like blog writing ninjas. I mean, like they could just like throw them 2 words and they would just write 800 words about it. It was amazing. But where you lean into one thing, it's like a seesaw, you are coming up short in another. And we realized, well, you know what, now that we've kind of served one business need, now let's kind of lean into the longer term goals of SEO optimization and, organic traffic and positioning ourselves as thought leaders and credible sources of information. So now we kind of leaned heavily into long form content like how-tos and guides and pillar content and whatnot. So as we kind of examine, this year, we will probably lean more heavily into, let's say, video, for instance, because that's another part of the seesaw that, it is I think underused by our team, the content marketing team. And it's so immediate and effective of a channel that we can't not ignore it anymore. So there's like these two, I know that's a long answer, but there are like these two kind of planes that we are kind of like operating on. The first is, and the most important, is like serving the business needs to ensure that, whatever tentpole stuff the company wants to do, we're supporting with all our might. And then kind of like the under the waterline stuff of like, okay, how can we improve, and what kind of new ways of telling stories can we use to, further educate readers and keep our credibility high.
Yeah. And with all of that going on, obviously there's a lot of work there. Um, what do you and your team do to help to streamline more of those kind of day-to-day, kind of recurring processes that are working around this? And I was looking forward to asking you this question because I saw, I think in LinkedIn, you say that you use nimble workflows to produce world-class content at scale. I love that term, nimble workflows, because it's kind of
Yeah,
music to my ears. That's the kind of person I am as well. I assume you're talking about things like that, like, streamlining processes, working nimble as well, like being able to act and respond quickly to things. Is there anything in particular that you do to make sure that that
sure.
happens?
Well, I think that, I'll get into like a specific kind of process to illustrate what I mean in a minute. But like my mantra has always been like, just don't overthink it. Right. And the reason is because I'm inclined to overthink everything. And so like by kind of making this my personal mantra, it kind of it bleeds out into, the work that we do. And one of the things that I think, or people like content strategists or content managers earlier in their careers kind of get hung up on is like, well, gosh, I have to have the perfect plan or the perfect workflow or the perfect production flow before I can ship a word of copy. Like I have to have it locked down, right? And our perspective has been like, ship, you know, put on your trainers, lace them up, tighten them up fast and run, right? And we will find a process as we go. And that's what we did here, and generally speaking, we did that here at Six Sense. But from my career, in past roles as, content strategist or managers, like I have a workflow down. And the workflow, is essentially like it is ideated, the story is ideated and assigned. We give the full support to the writer as they go off into, the wilderness and, find the links and do all the stuff when they come back. And, and then there is typically an iterative, none of this is new, like a typically an iterative, editorial process, but that is just kind of like one component of it. So the assigning editor, this is just like a newspaper, the assigning editor will review it, give it a bloody nose, get into a good place. And then it doesn't go straight into production. And what I mean in production, I mean like going into the CMS or WordPress to publish. It then is like, and then we goes through a second, what we call second edit. And this is like often another writer reviewing it, because what we want to do is ensure that our writers are growing as storytellers and as craftspeople. And there is one half of your brain that is a writer, and there is another part of the brain that is used when you're an editor. And we want to make sure that our staff is well rounded in that respect, where they are, they are not doing the heavy lifting of what we call the first edit. That's the assigning editor's job. But they are looking for ways for concision, like to tighten copy, to for voice style, for clarity. And we have found a lot of success in personal growth, professional growth in them. Even doing that, it may take them 20 minutes to do that, but like you do that enough day in and day out, and you become a better line editor. Then it'll go to what we would call like an approval, like third edit, which is often me. I try to proof everything that goes on the site before it does. And there are instances where like I have to pull the emergency brake and just say like can't like there's a narrative, like there's a non-obvious thing that no one else saw but me because I am removed from the process, right? Or I have a different, maybe I just happen to have a different kind of like professional experience that illuminates a hole that other people wouldn't. And so like, I'm kind of like, I try to be like that so that it basically like my fingerprints are on the gun. If anything goes wrong, like I can be the one that they can fire. It doesn't have to be. And then we do that proofing in the CMS. The rest of it's done kind of like in a Google Doc or something like that. And then we publish it. So like what's special about that? It's uncomplicated, right? It's as uncomplicated as it can be. And the workflow that kind of supports that in Asana, that's our project management tool, is equally streamlined, right? Like don't overthink it. I could go on and on about the merits of each little stage in the editorial process, but that's about it. I mean, there's a part we are getting increasingly better at what I call pre-editing, or the stage of the editorial process before a single word is written, right? Where we are finding, like, we're not just making ideas to fill the blog, right? Out of desperation. Like, we're actually trying to triangulate on, like, thoughtful topics that are relevant to our persona, like the personas and the verticals, right? And that's easy if you're doing that, like, maybe once a month, but like we're busting out like 3 or 4 often. Like, we used to bust out like 8 blog posts a week. We've dialed it down to maybe about 3 or 4. But even so, it's like if you can't just write for the sake of writing, right? To check a box for the boss, right? I mean, like, yes, you can. I'm sorry to say that many B2B content creators do that, where it's just like you use Google a particular keyword that's important to a business, and like it's all sounds the same. And it's distressing because that means that, like, nobody's learning, there's nothing new being presented, right? There's no revelations. As long as our content can bring 2 or 3 moments of revelation where the reader goes, huh, right? Or their eyes just widen just a bit, right? Or they like circle something, or they, whatever. Like, that's all we want, because like then we've earned their trust, because we're doing something more than parroting what everybody else is writing. So that pre-editing process where we are trying to find like actually relevant topics, and then outlining those topics in a way that we believe are relevant and resonant to the readers, like, that's become increasingly important as we've kind of like, my tenure has gone on. And we have found that pre-editing process where you're really trying to get into the heads of the reader, really impacts the quality and the relevance of what the output is, right? And on the output end, and I promise I'm done. I'm a long-winded guy. But on the output end, the editors being a champion for the reader. So, on the front end, we are trying to get into the heads of the reader. And on the other end, it's like, okay, we want to make sure that this is clear, that they understand it. We're an advocate for the reader, so that the copy can be as well and as thoughtfully presented as possible. And then we ship. So like, I know that that's a long way to describe what I would consider a pretty unsophisticated, process. And we take this approach when we do like content that would cross creative departments, like an ebook where we're involving design or, video, that sort of thing.
Similar process.
Yeah.
Touching on what you said about, the importance of content being different, not everything, not just coming out the same from a Google search, and that trust building as well. It's a really good segue onto what I wanted to ask you about now, which is AI. Just a super quick break from this conversation to let you know that if you're a B2B technology or professional services company and you want help with streamlining your content operations, outsourcing your content repurposing is the #1 way to produce more high quality content and boost your ROI without putting any more pressure on your team. In fact, it could save your team up to 30 hours per week. We offer content repurposing services for video and audio content. Whether you have a show or you're launching a brand new one, maybe you have an archive of awesome content, be it webinars or a virtual event, or you want help creating thought leadership content that we can repurpose, we've got you covered. Head to content10x.com to see how we can help you and start increasing your efficiency and the value you get from your content. Now back to the conversation. Obviously, as a business, it tend to use AI in your products and your offering, everything like that. But then from a content team and the content production side of things, everyone's talking about ChatGPT and things like that, which, as you've been saying, in terms of everything sounding the same, obviously everybody's using ChatGPT, then everything's going to sound the same. What's your opinion on that? Have you tried
Yep.
AI within
Yeah.
content production?
Firstly, we're all in. We're all in on AI. But we also understand that it's a minefield, right? And I think that more seasoned editors and writers, but especially editors, can are deeply concerned about what I call the dead-eyed copy, meaning copy that comes out of ChatGPT on its own is lifeless. It is vanilla. It is general. It is uniform in paragraph length. It's weird, right? I liken this to AI image creation tools. Let's just bear with me as I do a sidebar here. I like fooling around with AI image generation tools where I put in a prompt and it barfs out, like some, image. And I am like endlessly impressed by the artistic quality, right? But artists are disgusted by the output because they see all the things that I, as a non-artist, don't see, right? And like, and who's right and who's wrong? Well, I mean, it kind of depends on, your interests and your use cases, right? Well, let's kind of transplant that to the chat GPT space, where I think that even many content creators, but certainly people like in marketing, are kind of like doing the hallelujah dance for chat GPT, because this is exactly what we need. It's content at scale. It's the answer to all of our prayers, right? But the more seasoned, you know, readers, whether they know they're seasoned or not, and certainly more seasoned editors, just look at that and that's like, that copy is dead, right? There's no heart. And I don't mean it in like you write with passion or that you use adjectives that spark emotion. Like you can do that, but I don't even mean that. I just mean like there is just something about humans putting words together on a page that is different than the current output of Chat GPT. It's flatlined, right? But we also understand that Chat GPT does, present a promised land of content at scale, not world-class content at scale, but content at scale. So we are currently doing tons of experiments like under the hood in terms of like, well, how might we use this? We found, and we have found that ultimately for now, the best applications of AI for content creation are things that are modest in scope. Okay. You don't write a blog post with this thing because about 300 words into it, it'll like go off the rails, start publishing outright falsehoods, plagiarize things, and like probably profess its love to the writer, or to the reader, by the end of the story. I mean, like this is like there is like it is called. There's a term for this, and we've seen this. I don't know if you or your listeners have or your audience have seen this story about like how I think it was like a New York Times journalist spoke with the Bing AI for 2 hours. And by the end, the AI went into what the industry calls like a hallucinatory state. Like that is hallucination is what they really call it. And by the end, it was like professing its love for the interviewer. Was trying to convince the interviewer to leave his wife to
Oh,
be
wow.
with the AI. I mean, it was like, Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction. I mean, it was really just really bananas. And so like, okay, well, if we can't write 800-word blog posts with this thing yet because it goes off the rails, what can we do? Well, we can use it for emails. We can use it for story ideation. What topics might be relevant for our interests? We use it for outlining stories, right? And we use it for on the back end, in terms of like, well, maybe there's some highly technical content that should be presented in a more casual, reader-friendly style. And we'll ask ChatGPT to do that. And it's often very good at that. But what we will never do is publish something that the AI has written without any kind of human oversight or editorial review. So unfortunately, there are other things that we're doing under the hood and behind the curtain that I'd like to share with us, kind of like working with other solutions and figuring out ways to truly bring like a human-esque touch to what the AI is doing. I wish I could talk about it more, but I can't. But I'm like within a week, maybe even within a day, I was super bearish about AI, and then I saw something on the web, but it's like I got it. And I just realized, you know what, like the future is peaceful coexistence. This thing isn't taking jobs. Like this thing can enhance what we're already doing, right? It enhances our lives by arguably reducing some brain space for ideation. It reduces time in terms of content creation. It reduces time and effort in terms of editorial overview, reduces costs because like you're not, having to maybe engage a writing service to outsource your stuff. And there are there are trade-off costs that are associated with that. And I believe that those costs all happen in the beginning of this process, right? With the initial adoption of AI into an editorial workflow where it's like, oh crap, like how do we write effective prompts to get this thing to because it's like a magic spell. Like you can't use words like you and I use words to tell the AI how to write a thing. We would typically be like, well, write an 800 word blog post about how ABX impacts small SMB, B2B, LMNOP, XYZ. And like we give that to, a human and they're like, I'm on it. I got it. You give that to an AI and it's like, and it's
Yeah.
just, it's like it's a hot mess and it's all dead eyed. Right. So like there's this front end investment in terms of like, well, we have to become wizards. So we have to learn the magic spell and the magic words. And we have to inherit costs associated with onboarding and costs associated with like acquiring an AI solution if we need to do that. And then and like, oh gosh, we got to edit. And what are the best ways to edit this copy and et cetera. But I find that it's just like it's just like learning a new thing. It's all front end expense. You know, you went to college or you went to university, or maybe you didn't. And you're just like, you started a career in writing, but like that whole front, but there was like so much learning, right? And brain breaking and retraining the mind in unusual ways that I think we kind of take for granted because it's just like we've been writing because everyone can write. Yeah, that doesn't mean everyone can write well, but everyone can write. But everyone can write, and this is just like 2 or 3 steps removed from a natural kind of language that we have. That it's intimidating and it's costly. But I'm convinced that you master the magic spells, right, and the ongoing process at scale, and in the long term will create great benefits, especially. Here I go again. I promise I'm almost done. Especially in the instance of like ensuring that, and we want readers to meaning Sixth Sense. I want our readers to know when they're reading copy that's been assisted, by an AI in its creation. Like I want them to know that so that not only so that they, if they've got any skepticism, well, they can bring that to it, but that maybe they also can be reassured that, with human and AI, collaboration in that way, that the copy can be world class and resonant and just as relevant as it might otherwise be.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny because as you were, talking through that, and I think your answer was amazing, and I agree with everything that you said. I was thinking back to when you were explaining Sixth Sense, and you said, and hey, that what's great from a content perspective is we can tell you where the buyer is at a certain point, and you might need to address this with content. Because I'm just thinking, okay, so Sixth Sense then says we suggest the recommended chat GPT request could help you create this content warning. Please finish it off with a human to make sure that it's correct. But I mean, obviously you could integrate further and you could say, here's a article that we wrote to help you address this buyer's decision, although that would be more top of funnel, of course, rather
But
than
but not necessarily. Like imagine if you had an ABX tool that like Sixth Sense that could tell you, that can illuminate all of these different concerns that a specific contact or a specific buyer might have, or an account, right? And where they are in the buyer's journey, and their industry, and et cetera. You could have theoretically the AI create content that dynamically, it's like that would include all of those kinds of concerns for that specific constituent, right?
yeah, yeah,
This is like, in a way, and I get goosebumps thinking about this, but in a way, this is the one-to-one ABX or ABM dream, the paradise that like, I don't think that you can do very well actually at scale, right? Like one-to-one, ABM, engagement with a contact or an account requires a lot of specific and, research, specific heavy lifting in terms of content creation, making sure that it's specifically tuned to that business's needs. Well, again, with enough investment, enough, experimentation, enough, savvy production, whatever you want to call it, that one-to-one, bespoke content creation could theoretically happen with, with a chat GPT like solution. Right. And that's suddenly like super exciting because I think that's the promised land that ABM hasn't, that like ABM likes to talk about, but that it rarely sticks the landing on. That's when it comes to at scale. Yeah.
Yeah. Like when I said before, sort of top of funnel, I was thinking about, it wouldn't necessarily be able to address some of the, like, say, providing demos and things like that. And then all of a sudden I'm thinking, well, no, actually, I mean, even down to more lower funnel, an apprehension this buyer has could be addressed by this case study that you have on your website. Here's an email that you could write to this person, or they're active on LinkedIn. Here's the LinkedIn post that has that case study that if they there's so much. I mean, imagine we could go off on a big segue.
Amy, come work with me because that's what we're thinking about over here.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and I think that if there's anything that our conversation, this part of our conversation illustrates, is that like if you or if one sets aside the very human defensiveness of this thing's like Pac-Man and it's coming for my job, right? Or I'm not technically minded. This is for the nerds. I can't do any of this stuff. And instead, like open your mind to a positive success state. Let's just assume that it exists, right? Let's just pretend that that the people and the machines are getting along, right? And that the dream of optimized yakety schmackety blah 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 is real. Well, what then could you do with it? And I think that once people kind of climb over, that kind of emotionally driven hurdle, often driven by fear,
yeah,
that they can find a place that you and I have just found where it's like, and what if, and what if, and what if, and then it's a much more productive and pleasing conversation.
yeah. It is, isn't it? And I agree with you. It's a lot of it is driven by fear, and that when that's eliminated, yeah, there's it opens up a bigger conversation. Yeah, it's such an interesting topic, isn't it? I love it.
Me too, me too. And the wonderful thing is that this is just the earliest, most nascent days of this conversation.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Something that you mentioned when you were talking about ways that can be integrated into teams and businesses, and you were talking about support that you might get and how it might change the structure of teams, roles, at outsourced providers, things like that. Um, in your role at Sixth Sense, from through managing the content team and within the marketing operation, are there particular areas that you like to very specifically keep in house, and then others that you actually prefer to outsource and get expertise elsewhere?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Yeah, the answer is yes. All content is beautiful. All content is special. All content is wonderful and effective, but some content is more strategically important than other content, right? Not all content is created equal in that respect. So what I do is I kind of do a decision. It's kind of like almost like a little matrix or, decision-making tree, like a branching narrative in my mind of like, okay, well, what's the content strategy fueling this story, or blog post or, asset, whatever you want to call it. Where do we think we'll distribute it? Like how much promotion will it get? How significantly is it serving the business needs? And the more explicitly it serves business needs, like tells the story of a vertical, of specific persona, an underserved persona, whatever it might be, that all goes to my in-house team, right? And the reason being is that they've got more kind of like just the fluency of the solution and the fluency of our positioning and our value proposition when it comes to these particular topics that we might be writing about. It's just in the water. It's in the air, right? These people know it better than, like a freelancer. For the freelancers, and again, I think some of my most favorite content to create is top of funnel because there's a great creative challenge in terms of like, how do you take something that is so complicated and make it, compelling and interesting and legitimately educational to a cold reader? Like, I love that stuff because that reminds me of like newspaper reporting, like back in the day. But that stuff, is generally more kind of commoditized, and that will go to our freelancers who are, perfectly suited to not be writing to a specific kind of business need or vertical, but are being champions for a general reader, which in itself is, is worthy work. So it's typically that's how we kind of break it down.
That makes sense. Yeah, that completely makes sense. It's a good approach.
Yeah. And, and in terms of like our in-house people, for instance, when it comes to okay, so we want to write something about the manufacturing vertical. Well, we have like a writer who's on the manufacturing beat, and that writer has relationships with subject matter experts within the business who, are savvy about how to sell to manufacturers, what they're concerned about, what capabilities of our product manufacturers might use the most. So there's also like there's an ease of collaborating with people across departments within the business because of that, again, that in the water fluency that the writers have, and then the other people in other departments have. So it just seems to make it's almost like its own ecosystem, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. um, I've got some quick fire questions to ask you, Chris, to finish off our fantastic conversation. So number one, what would you say is a typically overlooked or undervalued tool that you'd recommend to content marketers like yourself?
Okay, I'm going to go back to, so firstly, I'm going to go back to the mantra of like, don't overthink it, right? And that then is reflected. I think that ethos is then should be reflected in your project management software, right? And I do recommend that like people, I didn't believe in it until I did, right? It's just like AI, oh, we can do this all in our head. We've got Google Docs to document all this stuff. Oh, blah 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 blah. And then it's like, oh, Asana.
Asana.
Yeah, right. And so again, it's like, so what do I, so where am I going with this? Where it's like, don't overthink it. And make that simplicity and elegance as replicate that in Asana. Because I think that in Asana, especially, you can have like an infinite number of like subtasks and checkboxes and did you do this? And did you follow this protocol? And da 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 da. And the productivity of a person gets bogged down in the mire of like, well, it didn't like, I'm an unwitting bottleneck in the production process because I didn't move the field from this to this. And I've got 5 people over here tapping their watch, waiting for the thing to get published. But because we have this really rigid production, flow, and I just being a person forgot to do that, like now it's a 5-alarm fire, right? And so in terms of like how we use Asana, because different departments within the business use it in different ways, but our workflow for editorial really does a very good job of kind of replicating that streamlined approach.
Yeah.
So I would bring that mindset to your project management software, whatever it is.
Yeah, Asana is great. We're Team ClickUp over here, but it's the same thing. We've used
Sure.
Asana, Basecamp, ClickUp. We used to use Trello, but they're fantastic and they
Yeah.
all have their own benefits.
Yeah. And yeah.
What would you say is if you were to give just one tip to your younger self starting out in this content marketing career? What would that tip be if you were to sit down, maybe when you started your first position in a role
Yeah.
similar now?
Well, okay. So it's like there's 2 answers. And I think the first is one that like most seasoned writers who are looking back on their careers might, resonate with. It's like, don't be so stupidly precious about your words, right?
Yeah.
You're not writing War and Peace. You're writing a blog. You're writing a blog post. We're not saving people's lives. I was such like a, diva when it came to change my words. What? That ice cracked and I got smart. But the more important kind of thing is what I call earning the right. You have to earn the right every 15 seconds, every 2 paragraphs about to keep that reader going down to the end of the blog post. Right? And the minute you start wasting their time with throat clearing and where a compelling lead should be, or hand wavy flim flam where statistics and third party information should be presented in a post to like to add credibility to the argument that you're making, right? And or like boom stats from your solution that illustrates its value instead of just saying, we get terrific results. I mean, that's flim flam. I mean, that's carny barking. What you need is like, by 200%, or, these particular customers found, et cetera. And so I have found that bringing tangible value through third party research, or through, kind of like research backed, claims or proof points, is one of many ways to have the reader, get down one or two paragraphs lower. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like citing, like citing a boom stat. It could be like even variations in terms of like using the visual craft of writing subheads. It's like a breath for the reader. It's like, it's a mental breath for the reader where they can pause. It's almost like a clutch in a car, right? You're kind of shifting. Or bullet points are also a really great way to kind of break up information in an easily digestible way that gets them further into the story. It's like having a fish hook in the mouth. But I'm telling you, the minute that you start wasting their time, they'll leave. And that's what high bounce rates represent, right? Like,
Yeah.
I found, and this is freaking bananas, but like, what was it? We did like on average, our blogs, and I can't, like, I know I'm misquoting this, but it was like the time on site for the blog for each blog was like 4 minutes. And like, that's fucking crazy, because like they are 6 minute reads or 5 minute reads. Like I had to pinch myself. Like, is this actually true? Right. And I think it represents, and even if I'm misquoting that stat, because I don't want that to be, the takeaway from this. The takeaway isn't the number. It is the intent, the creative intent, and the cognizance of making sure that you're telling a story that, that absolutely respects the reader's time and treats it sacred, and is committed to those moments of revelation that I was describing earlier, those moments.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic advice and tips. So yeah, thank you. That's awesome. And finally, so if you could create any kind of content for Sixth Sense, so we're talking about no sort of budget bounds, world's the limit. So it could be an ad with Tom Hanks in it, or Morgan Freeman voiceover in something, billboard in Times Square, you name it. What are you going for? What are you gonna put in place in that project?
So I would probably take all the money that it would cost me to hire Morgan Freeman, and instead, I like, this is the dream that I had when I came to Sixth Sense. It's a dream that Sixth Sense shares. Okay. It's just that, economic realities being what they are, resources being what they are. This is a long-term goal for us instead of a short-term goal. But it is to create, to make our blog, or a blog associated with Sixth Sense, to be like the place you go, right? The only place you need to go for information, not about like Sixth Sense. Who cares, right? Who cares about the shill? I'm not talking about the shill. I'm talking about like, if you're a manufacturer and you've got questions about ABM, this is where you go. If you're looking for trends on ABM in like terms of like emerging technologies, this is where you go. It is almost like, a news magazine, and big surprise being a former newspaper person, imagine it being kind of like, the 21st century of, a newspaper that you would visit every day, to kind of get the lowdown, even like BDRs or SDRs, what are great tips for you in career development? I mean, like the whole spectrum, with different sections, serving different constituents. Like, that's really the dream, because I think that does a great good, that's worthy work, in that it does a great good for the reader because they are legitimately learning, and it does a great good for the business because by association with that world-class content, the credibility of the business is illustrated, and I'm sure there would be some lift, generated by it.
I love that answer because it's obviously achievable, and you're clearly on the way there to it. It is it is.
Yeah.
I'm sure we will see you achieve that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, God willing, and but it is but we know it's achievable because we see it
exactly,
every day, as made manifest in a newspaper. So yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So
That'd be
I'm
awesome.
sure I've gobbled up far too much of your time.
No,
I am
no.
so very sorry for going on and on and on.
Absolutely no apologies at all. It's been a wonderful conversation, Chris. So thank you so much for coming on the show. Everyone listening, I'm sure, is going to be hugely appreciative of spending this time with you. So where do you want people to connect with you if they want to find out more and just stay connected to you and all of your wonderful ideas?
Sure. Yeah, I'm morally obligated to shill the business. So you can find all our great work at sixsense.com, but you can find me on LinkedIn. You can search for either JC Hutchins or Chris Hutchins, and I should pop up right away.
Cool. And of course, we'll put the links to that in the show notes as well. So everything will be there. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really, really appreciate it. So thanks for your time.
I appreciate it too. And thanks so much for the interest and the opportunity to share.
Thanks for listening to this episode of B2B Content Strategist. Do let me know what you thought of our conversation by getting in touch with me on social media. You'll find Content 10X on all the social platforms or search for Amy Woods, CEO of Content 10X on LinkedIn. To find out more about streamlining your content marketing processes and specifically about content repurposing, check out our website content10x.com, where you'll find information and resources that will help you achieve more with your content more efficiently. And if you're looking for a partner to outsource your content repurposing and distribution to, get in touch, as we offer a world-class, fully end-to-end, done-for-you content repurposing service. Thanks again for listening to this episode, and I'll catch you in the next one.